So welcome to Jerusalem. Here we are. As I walked into to this enterprise here, it really struck me that this is a very successful business, the business of faith. And I was directed to come into Jerusalem. I was actually in Jerusalem in November last year. I had an opportunity to go on a trip with 7 CEOs from businesses in South Africa that we actually went off to go and explore Israel and the West Bank and to go and discover and understand what are some of the challenges and opportunities of living and working and operating in Israel and the West Bank. And I could spend the whole afternoon telling you about that. That's not my brief today, so we'll move on from that. But I'm Adam, as Dina said. Dina, thank you very much for the introduction. It's my pleasure to see so many faces. When I saw the advert that was going out and being tweeted, I thought, well, this is really going to put you off from coming and spending half an hour and hearing a little bit about my story. If I'm honest with you, I'm the warm-up act for Patrick's story later on. So I really take it as a privilege that you've come to hear this story. And I wanted to try to share with you a very personal perspective. I am the leader of a business in South Africa, and I've led various businesses and done various things in my life. And when I think about how I got here, it's very important, I think, to dig deep and to try to share the real story and not to potentially just dress up a story very much in the way that I see people on Facebook every day, showing their life story. And generally, the life story on Facebook is generally a very positive thing. And I think that we should avoid that particular trait. Life isn't always a wonderful thing. And I thought I would share with you a very personal story. Now, in doing that, I must admit to you, I feel a little bit vulnerable, because I'm going to show you some things and share some things with you, and most of you are strangers. Some of you are friends that I've met before. Some of you are potentially, there's no such thing as the definition of a stranger, is there? It's only friends that haven't been met before. So through this process, hopefully, we'll get to know each other. I think for certain, you're going to get to know me better than I'm going to get to know all of you. But let's try. I'm showing you a picture of my family. So here's my family. They're in there somewhere. This isn't the whole of my family. This is a group of families. And if I tell you, here's there's me, by the way. I was the hairless one then. This was taken in July last year in Sabi Sands. And next to me in the pink is my wife, and in front of me is my son and my daughter over here. My son is 16 years old, and my daughter is 14 years old. Now that's a story that I try to reflect on. How the hell did that happen? In fact, I probably shouldn't say, as we're standing in a church, I shouldn't refer to hell, should I? How did that happen, John? Scrub that from your notes. I didn't say that. But when I look at my kids and my family, it's clearly a very important anchor for me. And I'd like to share with you a little bit more about my family. But the people that you see around us here are a group of fellow YPOers, Young Presidents Organization members. And each of these families then has a CEO, a president, or a chairman, or a managing director of a business that is in that family. And all these people here came from all over the world, from the US, from Europe, from Australia, from Asia, from South America. And my family had the privilege of taking them into the bush for the first time in their lives to actually go and experience the bush. And I'm sure that for all of us that have had that experience, it's a very special thing to do. And when it's the first time for someone to go and experience that, it's a very special thing to share. So we were responsible for taking all these people. Just to let you know, in the Young Presidents Organization, so these are all leaders of businesses, there are 24,000 members, or 24,000 presidents, CEOs, chairmen, or managing directors in just about every country around the world. So it's a very powerful network, and it's a network that I've been a member of for the last 11 years. And I want to tell you now that it has changed my life. It has changed the way I think, the way I act, the network that I have, the people that I can go to when I get stuck, when I'm running my business and I'm at the top of my business. Who do I turn to for advice, for guidance, for thoughts and ideas? Well, it's the friends that I have in my network in the Young Presidents Organization. And in February this year, I had a very special event. I turned 50 years old. Now that's a very important milestone, and I guess being a member of the 50 plus club, for those of you that might be approaching that at some point, we all get there, but it's not as bad as it seemed as I was getting closer to it. But last year I went away for a weekend with a group of about a dozen CEOs from South African businesses. And we went on a weekend together to do something called Purpose Quest. And Purpose Quest was an opportunity for us as CEOs to go and spend a little bit of time thinking about, well, what is it that we are achieving in our lives? And what is it that we want to achieve in our leadership roles? And most importantly, what is our purpose, our individual purpose? What is the why? Why are we doing what we do? Are we power crazed? Do we just like the money? Do we like the influence that we have? What is it about being a chief executive and being a leader of a business that really was very meaningful to us? And we went away and we spent the weekend together in a facilitated work group, working with each other, working with the facilitators to try and think through and answer those questions. Some of the CEOs that I was with, very much like the people in this room, were friends. Some of them I had never met before. And it's very, very interesting when you spend time together with people that are both friends and complete strangers, the takeaways, the value, the perspectives, the first impressions that one can draw from spending that time. And the result of that weekend together was something that I'm very proud of. John, I think the level of art on here is probably below your standard, and I apologize, because this is something that I drew, and it was meaningful to me. So when I share it with you, it's something that's private, so it's not meant to be a work of art. We're not going to auction it off at the end. You don't need to flatter me with any thoughts and ideas about my artistic talents. But let me share with you that part of the process of engaging with the other leaders was to consider one's life over a period of consecutive 7-year cycles. So the first 7 years, the second 7 years, the third, and so on. And last year, when I did this, as I was approaching 50, I was indeed 49 years old, which when I was asked to encapsulate my life into 7-year cycles, I immediately thought of the 7 of Hearts, because the 7 of Hearts has 7 hearts, or 7 sevens, being 49. And it was meaningful to me in terms of thinking about, well, what happened in my life over those 7 years, those 7-year cycles. Some of the hearts on a 7 of Hearts card are up the right way. Some of the hearts are not up the right way. That's the nature of a playing card. So that's my board. There's the 7 sevens, or the 7 of Hearts that are there. So the first 7 years were basically from the year 1 to 7. And like all of us, those formative years are all about family and school and going to school and learning, getting the early childhood development in place, learning to read, learning to write, learning to do basic maths. So not a lot I can say about those first 7 years. Let's go to the second and third 7 years. Here's my upside down hearts. The sad part of the story was when I was 8 years old, my father passed away. My father was 32 years old, and I was just 8 years old. And I'm sure for all of us to lose a parent at such a young age is not the best of starts in life. As you can see, in the second or the third of my 7 years, when I was 17 years old, my mother passed away. Now, I was one of 4 children. I was the second child in the family, and I had 2 much younger brothers and sisters. But as I think back over this early start to my life, and I hadn't started my career, there was a degree of adversity. There was a degree of challenge. Being an orphan just before I took my matric really didn't set me up well to complete my matric or my equivalent of my matric. I should explain, if you haven't already picked up, I'm sure you have, that I'm originally not from South Africa. I was originally from London, from the UK. So one would hope that being in the UK, that there was some sort of support mechanism that was there to ensure that these 4 kids that had lost their parents did not go and lose their track in life. And I was very, very lucky. You can see there's a brand name that I've penciled in up here, which was 2 things that happened. One was that British Gas, which is the equivalent of Eskom in South Africa, came forward and offered me an internship, which was the most wonderful opportunity to have a business recognize that they could do something to help a young learner get into university. I didn't do particularly well in my matric. My grades were not sufficient to get into the university that I wanted to get into, and I was very fortunate that I had a business on my side that approached the university and said, let him in, because we back him and we'd like to see him at university, and we want him to be in a scholarship and an internship program. The other thing that happened in this first 21 years was that I met the love of my life and my wife, Jackie, which when I showed her this and said, well, it was Jackie and British Gas, she said, well, which one of those was most important in your life? So if we could, let's click on to the 4th period. So we're now between 21 and 28 years old. So I graduated from university. And I got into university, as I said, by the skin of my teeth. And I wasn't particularly academic or focused. And as I discovered with my son, if it had been diagnosable back then I probably would have been diagnosed as ADHD. And a young man who was perhaps a little bit not focused on the academic side of my studies and career. But at university, with the backdrop of what I had learned in my scholarship, and with the support and the guiding eye of a very strong mentor who was guiding me through my time at university from British Gas, I really found my slot. And I really found how to study. I learned how to learn, which was really applying my mind and focusing and making sure that I understood how to study. And I graduated from university with a first-class honours degree, which really set me up, I think, exiting my university for the start of my career. One of the things that was very interesting to me was that same mentor from British Gas, having been at my side for 5 years through the whole scholarship program, was the first person to say to me as I graduated, Adam, it's time for you to leave British Gas. Now, I found that to be very, very strange or controversial, because I had a bond, I had a connection with the organisation that had stood by me. And there was my mentor saying to me, you need to leave, you need to go somewhere else, you need to develop your career. And that was probably some of the best advice I could have ever got. And I went and I joined this organisation there. AC stands for Anderson Consulting. Today it's known as Accenture. And today it's one of the biggest consulting organisations in the world. And I spent a total of 10 years with Anderson Consulting, and I travelled the world. I spent my time learning and developing. These formative years in my career gave me an exposure and an opportunity to business that I really couldn't have got anywhere else. About 6 years into my career with Anderson Consulting or Accenture, I left, and I decided that I would go off and study and go and do my MBA. I'm sure you've heard the saying, do you know how you can tell if somebody has an MBA? They tell you. That's right, they tell you. There is no other way. There isn't. So I've told you now. And I went off to Switzerland to a business school called IMD, the International Institute for Management Development. And it was in Switzerland, where I was studying full-time for a year, that I really got a passion for the next stage in my career. And I came to South Africa. I was sent to South Africa to undertake a social enterprise project in South Africa. Now, this was 21 years ago, in 1996. And I came here and I fell in love with what I saw. I saw a tremendous opportunity in the country, and I became very excited about the potential of coming and being part of the transformation and the changes that were happening in the Rainbow Nation, and I wanted to be part of it. Luckily, my wife also, at the time my fiancée, said, well, let's go for a couple of years and let's go and experience life in South Africa and see what's happened. That brings us into the fifth cycle of our 7 years. So here's the fifth, sixth, and seventh. This is where I'm really going to accelerate. Because the fifth one was the start of our lives in South Africa. And in case you're wondering what that blue blotch there is, it's the Vaal River. The Vaal River was something that we discovered very early in our time in South Africa, and has become a very special family place for us, and a place that has kept us sane living in Johannesburg. And that's when Aidan was born, and we were just married. Into the sixth cycle, and I had left Anderson Consulting, and I joined a South African company called Dimension Data. I hope many of you might know Dimension Data, and I started at Dimension Data as the managing director of a new startup business called Merchants, which is a customer contact business. And that business was launched at a great opportune time, but that opportune time very quickly burst. The internet bubble in South Africa burst, and Dimension Data pretty much overnight went from being the darling of the South African stock market to being the dog of the market. And if you potentially recall the history there, the Dimension Data was responsible for the biggest corporate write-offs in the history of South Africa, $4.5 billion, or by today's exchange rate, about $60 billion, thrown away, wiped away. I don't know which other way to say, destroyed, never coming back. $60 billion taken away and flushed down the proverbial toilet. I was with Dimension Data for 9 years, and for 6 of those years, I spent my time as the group executive for sales and marketing globally at Dimension Data. And that meant that I had to travel the world for up to 200 days a year to 48 different countries. And that was a job that I loved. I loved doing, but I had young children. My daughter was born 2 years after my son. And during that time when I was traveling, I came home after a 3-week trip. And as I came back to my house, my dogs, I thought, came to greet me, but instead they came and attacked me at the gate. And I walked into the house and my wife said to me, Adam, Do you know, when you're away, we have a routine. When you come home, you disrupt that routine. So you need to make a decision. Either you are away or you come home. Because after 6 years, it's really becoming very, very troubling. So I made my decision and I left Dimension Data and I joined Supergroup, the industrial conglomerate. And I became the Chief Operating Officer of Supergroup. And Supergroup at the time employed 12,000 people and was generating some significant profits, but it was a business that seemed to be on a bad trajectory. And I was there for a month and I realized very quickly that it was on a terrible trajectory. And before very long, Supergroup was in the newspapers, my face was on the front page of the Sunday Times, and the pressure was on because Supergroup was re-rated by the ratings agencies, the very ratings agencies that have had such a pressure point on South Africa's economy, re-rated Supergroup, and we became a junk bond. We became a business that nobody wanted to invest in. It was a very, very serious scenario. 12,000 jobs were at stake in that business, and we had operations all over sub-Saharan Africa. And I spent my time in the 14 months that I was part of Supergroup on the turnaround of that business. And I spent my time in situations in Angola, in Zambia, in Mozambique, where it became very, very pressurized. It became a life or death situation, not only for the people working in the business, but when people start putting guns in your face and threatening you, it becomes a very personal issue. I then left and I joined IQ Business, and IQ Business is a much nicer organization, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment, but that's been my home for the last 7 years. And so that last 7-year cycle has been a whole fresh, different perspective of being part of a privately owned management consulting organization in South Africa. Now, why have I told you those 7 cycles? I've told you those because that's what's behind me. That's what led to me becoming a leader, taking up the leadership roles and the opportunities that I took. And it's also what's behind my purpose. And my purpose is something that really took those 3 days that I was together with my peers from YPO, thinking about these 7 years, thinking about the experience, contemplating, well, what led to who I am today? And what is that purpose? What is the why in my life? So let me share with you that why. So this is what I came up with, and it's a personal statement, that I am here to inspire others to overcome adversity by thinking and acting differently, created with authentic energy. That's me. Now, that's not something that I would expect anybody else in the room to stand up and say, but that's my purpose, because it's a very personal thing. And there are so many elements of what happened to me over time that have led to that. But it's crystal clear to me that that is me. That is why I'm here. And that is why I am leading the business that I lead. Well, let me tell you about that business. So IQ Business, there's a lot I could tell you about IQ Business. There are 600 of us in Johannesburg and Cape Town. And we are growing at a phenomenal rate. We're 19 years old this year, so we're very much still an adolescent company. But we have a very clear purpose. And that purpose goes beyond generating a profit as a business. We believe very strongly that as a profitable business, it's very important to make a profit, because making a profit enables us to do so many things with those profits. But if life was only about generating a profit or taking home a salary on a monthly basis, life becomes very narrow and boring. So our purpose as a business is to grow businesses and to grow people and to grow Africa. And that's absolutely pivotal to what we do on a daily basis. We look for opportunities to help our clients to grow. We look for opportunities to grow the young people in our business to gain skills and to move forward. And we happen to be sitting on the fastest growing continent in the world, which has its challenges and opportunities, but we're part of that. Is anybody in the room at this point comfortable with a zero growth economy in South Africa? Do any of us sit here and say, Oh, well, that's good. Well, it's 0.3% for last year. I have a belief that once we get to 0 point anything, you may as well stop with the naught, because our economy needs to grow at somewhere north of 5.7% for us to deal with the unemployment, the poverty, the inequality that we have in South Africa. So we are not satisfied with being a zero growth economy, and we have to contribute to the growth that we see there. So that's what we are about as a business. Here's some of our people at IQ, and our business is made up of 50% men and 50% women, pretty much exactly to the number. And we have a very diverse demographic in our business, but not enough at the leadership levels in our business, and it's a huge challenge for us. So we're really focused as we grow our people on making sure that those young people take up the leadership roles that we're looking for. And behind that is that we spend an awful lot of time focusing and developing on on how we enable our IQers, as we call ourselves. In the center there, you can see the red person is somebody that works for IQ Business. They're an IQer. And we surround them with systems, with processes, with people, with ways to develop their leadership potential, with ways to enhance their growth, with ways to ensure that they are learning and developing as individuals. And that starts with our learning and development focus as a learning organization. The learning does not stop when you leave school, unfortunately, John. The homework doesn't stop. I take a lot of homework home, I can tell you, it's terrible. It continues. There's so much learning opportunity, and we focus on ensuring that learning cycle is there. I was exchanging tweets this morning with someone that was saying that he believed that leadership development must be owned by the CEO of an organization. And I was reading it in the car. I wasn't driving, but I was reading it in the car on the way to work. And I thought, okay, leadership development must be owned by the CEO of an organization. I buy that, but then the more I thought about it, I thought, well, that's not right, because that places the onus on me and only me to own leadership development. So I started tweeting him back, and I ended up saying to him, do you know what? In my organization, I'm often told by some of our other leaders in the business, or by some of the youngsters who've just come in as interns, that they want to own a piece of the leadership development, and my role is just to pay for it. And that I should simply stand back and let them do their thing. Just pay, don't get involved, don't interfere, which, by the way, is something my daughter says to me a lot at the moment. But so it reminds me when some young people say to me, don't interfere, let me lead, let me learn. Because if I fail, then I'll owe you the money, or I'll have learned. At least it's an opportunity. Don't just sit there and own it and dictate to me what I need to do to become a new leader or a progressive leader in our business. And I really feel strongly about that. And that's part of the character of our business, is to make sure that we focus on creating those opportunities. And underneath the learning and development, we have these two things that you can't really see here. We have something called SoChill and the IQ Foundation. And SoChill is our social club, but the people that run it are our IQers, are our youngsters. In fact, for the most part, it's our second-year interns. And they have a budget of about R500,000 a year to spend on social events and activities. And they decide how that money is spent. And I don't interfere in that. And what I see happening is that the leadership talent that develops in our business from taking accountability and taking the responsibility to spend that money wisely in a well-governed way, they're my future leaders. And it's the youngsters that take the opportunity to grasp a hold of that and run with it. That's when we see leadership development happening. And then the last thing that I would say is about our IQ Foundation. As I said to you, we're in business for much more than simply making a profit. We're in business to make an impact in the societies in which we operate. And the IQ Foundation is our corporate social responsibility enterprise, because we back and we support and we get engaged with organisations that become our beneficiaries. We're the benefactors for them. But one of the most important things I think that has occurred there is we don't just pay money over. We don't just make a guilt payment. We get involved. And we have a motto: 1% of our profit, 1% of our service, 1% of our time. That's what we give to our beneficiary organisations. That's why I'm here today to come and speak to you, is that we're giving service, we're giving time to Partners for Possibility. That's why I participate on the board of Symphonia and Partners for Possibility, is because we want to give our support. We want to make sure that Partners for Possibility grows, because 580 schools in 5 years is a fantastic achievement, as I say to Robin and Louise and the team. But guys, if we continue at that pace, in fact, why don't we increase the pace and increase the pace to 500 schools into the program every year going forward? And how long will it take us to take on all 20,000 state schools that are in trouble right now? Well, it will take us 40 years to get there. Is that good enough? Absolutely not. I nearly said hell no again, but I shouldn't say that. So vitally important that we get behind initiatives like that, and that's part of our leadership development, and that's part of what we do at IQ Business. Thank you, Dina. Thank you.